I raised my husband's child with all my heart, believing he was mine. But the day I discovered his secret affair and learned the truth about that child, my whole world shattered into pieces. I need to get this out before I lose my nerve. Before I delete this like I've done 100 times before. My hands are shaking as I type this, and I don't know if it's from the coffee or the fact that I'm finally admitting what I did. 3 years ago I had everything. A husband who loved me unconditionally, a beautiful son who called me mama, and that looked perfect from the outside. Today I'm sitting in a studio apartment that smells like cheap air freshener, eating cereal for dinner, and I haven't seen my boy in 2 weeks. This is how it started. It was such a small thing. That's what makes this whole nightmare even worse. It wasn't some grand passion or epic love story. It was boredom. Pure boredom. Mark had been working late again. Software development pays well, but those deadlines were brutal. He'd come home exhausted, barely acknowledge me, eat whatever I'd kept warm for him, and fall asleep on the couch with his laptop still open. Our son Jamie would climb on him, trying to get his attention, and Mark would mumble something about daddy being tired. I felt invisible, like a ghost haunting my own. The gym was my escape, an hour every morning while Jamie was at press school and Mark was already at the office. Just me, my music, and the endorphins that made me feel alive again. That's where I met Ryan. God, even typing his name makes me sick now. But back then he was everything Mark wasn't. He noticed me. He'd spot me during my sets, compliment my form, make jokes that actually made me laugh. He was one of those guys who seemed to know everyone, always smiling, always confident. Husband's a lucky man, he said one morning, nodding at my wedding ring as I adjusted the weights. Some days I wonder if he even remembers he has a wife. I said back, it was supposed to be a joke. The kind of harmless complaint every married person makes. But Ryan didn't laugh, he just looked at me with this intensity that made my stomach flutter in a way it hadn't in years. His loss, he said quietly. That should have been it. That should have been the moment I grabbed my water bottle, made some excuse, and found a new gym. But I didn't. I stayed. I let him start texting me little motivational messages. I let our post-workout coffee runs become a routine. I told it was innocent, just friendship. Just someone who actually listened when I talked about feeling trapped in my own. Different from the other wives around here. Ryan said one afternoon as we sat in his car after the gym. It was raining and I'd forgotten my umbrella. We're still alive. Most of them look like they've given, maybe they're just tired. I said, but my heart was racing. Our tired Sarah. The way he said my name, like it meant something, like I meant something. That's when he me. Soft at first, then desperate when I didn't pull away. And God help me, I him back like I was drowning and he was air. When we finally broke apart I was crying. Not from guilt, that would come later. From relief. From feeling wanted again. I can't do this, I whispered. Then don't, he said. But don't pretend don't want to. I went home that day and tried to act normal. Made dinner, helped Jamie with his coloring book, waited for Mark to come home. When he did, he my forehead absently and started talking about some bug in the code that was driving him crazy. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab him by the shoulders and shake him and ask when he'd stopped seeing me. When I'd become just another fixture in the house, like the coffee maker or the couch. Instead I nodded and made sympathetic noises and pretended my lips weren't still tingling from another man's. The next morning I went back to the gym. I told I was going to end it. Tell Ryan it was a mistake, that I loved my husband and my family. But when I saw him there, doing pull-ups with his shirt sticking to his back with sweat, all my resolve crumbled. I was hoping come, he said when he spotted me. Ryan, about yesterday. Forget yesterday, he said. What about today? And that's how it started. Not with some dramatic declaration of love or a moment of uncontrollable passion. With me being too weak to say no. With me choosing the easy lie over the hard truth. We started meeting after the gym. His apartment was 20 minutes from the gym, in the opposite direction from my house. Clean, modern, nothing like the lived-in chaos of my home with toys everywhere and crayon marks on the walls. For 2 hours every morning, I got to be someone else. Someone desired, someone who mattered. The guilt ate at me but not enough to stop. I justified it in 1,000 ways. Mark and I barely talked anymore. We hadn't been intimate in months. He was married to his job. I was just getting some attention I deserved. All lies, of course. But lies I desperately wanted to believe. The worst part, Jamie noticed first. Mummy's happy, he said one afternoon looking from his building blocks with those big brown eyes that looked just like Mark's. What do you mean, sweetie? Sing now. In the car. Used to be sad. 4 years old, and he could see what I thought I was hiding. I was glowing. I was alive in a way I hadn't been in years, and it was all built on a lie. That night Mark came home early for once. He brought flowers, grocery store roses, but flowers nonetheless. What's the occasion? I asked, taking them with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. Do I need an occasion to buy my wife flowers? He wrapped his arms around me from behind as I put them in water. I know I've been working too much lately. I'm sorry, this was my moment. My chance to confess. To tell him everything and beg for forgiveness. To save my family before I destroyed it completely. Instead I leaned back against him and said, don't need to apologize for working hard. Coward. That weekend we went to the park as a family. Mark pushed Jamie on the swings while I sat on a bench watching. A normal family doing normal family things, but all I could think about was Ryan. About Tuesday morning and the way he looked at me like I was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. My phone buzzed. A text from Ryan: missing. Can't wait for Tuesday. I should have deleted it. Instead I found smiling. Who's that? Mark asked. Settling beside me on the bench while Jamie climbed the jungle gym. Just my mom. I lied easily. The lies were getting easier. Tell her I said hey, he said, then pointed at Jamie. Look at him go. He's getting so big. I watched our son. And he was our son. In every way that mattered, scale the climbing wall with determination. Mark was right, he was getting big, growing, and I was missing it because I was too busy living in a fantasy. But I still wasn't ready to give the fantasy. That Tuesday Ryan was different. More intense, more demanding. Leave him, he said afterward as we lay in his bed. Her miserable, I can see it. It's not that simple, I said. Jamie, kids adapt, deserve to be happy. Sarah, the scary part. For a moment I considered it. Actually considered blowing my entire for a man I'd known for 3 months. That's when I knew I was in too deep. But I still didn't stop. The affair went on for 6 more months. 6 months of lies and excuses and living a double. 6 months of watching my husband try harder and harder to connect with me while I grew more and more distant. 6 months of my son asking why mommy seemed sad again, because the guilt was finally winning. The end came suddenly, the way these things always do. Mark's company was planning a big presentation, and he'd been staying late every night for weeks. I'd gotten sloppy, careless, started texting Ryan during dinner, claiming it was work friends or mom group drama. That Friday night, Mark came home early again. Another attempt to surprise his increasingly distant wife. But this time I wasn't home. I was with Ryan and I told Mark I was at book club. He called Sarah's mom first, then my sister. Then the friends he thought I might be with. Nobody knew about any book club. When I finally came home at midnight, spinning some story about going for drinks after discussing the book, he was waiting in the dark living room. How was book club? He asked quietly. Fine, I said, still lying. Still choosing the easy path. Worried. Oh, Sarah. His voice was so tired, so broken. Please don't lie to me anymore. And that's when I knew it was over. Not the affair, that had been doomed from the start. My marriage, my family, everything. The next part is harder to write. The part where everything falls apart. Where I learned that some mistakes can't be fixed, no matter how much want them to be. But that's part 2 of this story. The part where the real consequences started. I stared at Mark in that dark living room, and for a split second, I considered lying again, making some elaborate story about where I'd really been. But something in his face stopped me. He looked defeated, like he already knew. Mark. Tamia's voice was barely a whisper. Please, just tell me the truth. So I did. Not all of it. I was still a coward, but enough. I told him about Ryan, about the gym, about feeling lonely and invisible and making the worst possible choice. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things or storm out. He just sat there nodding slowly, like I was confirming something he'd suspected for months. How long? He asked. 6 months, I whispered. He closed his eyes. To love him? The question hit me like because the honest answer was no. I loved the attention. I loved feeling wanted. But Ryan himself. He was selfish, immature, someone who pursued married women for sport. I'd been just another conquest. No, I said. Mark, I love our family. This was just what, Sarah? Just bored. Just feeling neglected. His voice was getting sharper now, the shock wearing off. So decided to I made a mistake? A terrible, horrible mistake. But we can fix this, we can go to counseling, He laughed, but there was no humor in it. There is no we anymore. Made sure of that. That's when Jamie appeared at the top of the stairs in his pajamas, rubbing his eyes. Why are fighting? He asked, and my heart shattered. Mark was on his feet immediately, scooping Jamie. We're not fighting, buddy. Just talking. Let's get back to bed. I watched my husband carry our son upstairs, both of them moving away from me, and I knew I'd lost them both. The next morning Mark was gone before I woke. He'd taken Jamie to his mother's house. The note he left was brief. Need time to think. We'll call later. I spent that day calling in sick to work and sitting on my kitchen floor, crying until I had no tears left. I kept picking my phone to call Ryan, then putting it down. What was the point? He'd gotten what he wanted, he'd broken a marriage. Mission accomplished. When Mark finally came home that evening, he had divorce papers. Already, I asked, staring at the legal documents like they might disappear if I blinked hard enough. I called a lawyer this morning, asked him to rush them. Mark's voice was eerily calm. I want out Sarah. Tonight. Mark, please, we need to talk about this. Think about Jamie. I am thinking about Jamie. The calm facade finally cracked. I'm thinking about what it does to a kid to grow watching his parents each other. I'm thinking about what kind of example we'd be setting if I just forgave and pretended this never happened. But families work through things like this all the time. No. His voice was final. Some things can't be worked through. Some betrayals are too deep. I packed a bag with shaking hands while Mark sat in the living room, staring at the wall. When I came downstairs with my suitcase, he didn't look at me. Can I at least say goodbye to Jamie? He's sleeping. I don't want to confuse him more than necessary. He's my son too, Mark. The question hung in the air like a physical thing. I stared at him, not understanding. What do you mean? Mark finally looked at me then and his eyes were dead. Nothing. Just go. Sarah, please just go. I went to my sister's house that night. Lisa took one look at my face and pulled me inside without questions. But by the next morning the questions came. How could do this? She asked over coffee, her voice carefully controlled. He's one of the good ones, Sarah. And Jamie adores. I know I messed everything. Didn't make a choice. Every day for 6 months chose to lie to family. She was right, and hearing it out loud made it worse. The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, temporary custody arrangements, and the slow process of explaining to everyone why my marriage had imploded. My mom cried when I told her. Actually cried. I raised better than this, she said, and those words deeper than anything Mark had said. My friends at work started treating me differently. Polite but distant, like infidelity might be contagious. The few who tried to be supportive said things like these things happen, and marriage is hard, but I could see the judgment in their eyes. The worst part was Jamie. Mark let me see him twice a week, supervised visits at first. My beautiful, innocent boy who couldn't understand why mommy didn't live at home anymore. When are coming back? He asked during our third visit, playing with his toy cars at the kitchen table while Mark watched from the doorway. I don't know. Heard, sweetie? Did I do something bad? No, I grabbed his little hands. No, baby, didn't do anything bad. Mommy made some mistakes, but it has nothing to do with point. But how to explain selfishness to a 4-year-old? How to make a child understand that sometimes parents break promises for no good reason? After a month, Mark agreed to unsupervised visits. I got Jamie every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. It felt like scraps compared to what I'd had, but I was grateful for anything. That's when I started noticing things. Little things at first. The way Jamie would sometimes call me by my first name instead of mommy. How he'd ask if daddy was coming to pick him, even when it was my custody time. The way he seemed more comfortable at Mark's house than anywhere else. Then there were the bigger things. Daddy says I might have a new mommy soon. Jamie announced one Wednesday, coloring at my tiny kitchen table. My crayon froze mid. What do you mean? He has a friend. She's nice. She makes good pancakes. Mark was dating. Already. After 2 months. I called him that night after Jamie was asleep. Really, Mark, already. Don't do this, Sarah. Jamie told me about friend. Her name is Jennifer. And she's been helping me figure out how to be a single parent. Something I'm still learning thanks to Pine. It's too soon for him to meet someone new. Don't get to have an opinion about my parenting choices anymore. The line went dead. I spent that night researching Jennifer online like some kind of. She was pretty successful, divorced with no kids of her own. Perfect stepmother material. The jealousy was eating me alive, but underneath it was something worse. The growing realization that Jamie was already adapting to without me as his primary parent. Kids are resilient, everyone says. But sometimes that resilience looks a lot like moving on. 3 months after I'd moved out, Mark dropped. That changed everything. I need to tell something, he said when he came to pick Jamie after a weekend visit. About Jamie. Something in his tone made my freeze. What about him? Mark glanced at Jamie, who was playing in my living room, then looked back at me with an expression I couldn't read. He's not mine. The world tilted. What? I got a DNA test done last month. He's not my biological son. I felt like I was drowning. That's impossible. Is it? Mark's voice was cold. Because the math is pretty interesting, Sarah. Jamie was born 9 months after that conference went to in Chicago. The one where came home late and weird and wouldn't talk about what happened. Chicago. God, I'd almost forgotten about Chicago. It was 5 years ago, back when Mark and I were trying for a baby. I'd gone to a marketing conference alone. There'd been drinks, networking events, a hotel bar where I'd met a charming stranger named David. One drunken night that I'd buried so deep I'd convinced it never happened. Mark? So I'll ask again. Is Jamie my son? I looked through my doorway at the little boy playing with blocks, humming to himself. The child I'd raised from birth. The child who had Mark's mannerisms, his stubborn streak, his love of building things. But not his eyes, not his nose, not his smile. How had I never seen it before? I don't know, I whispered. Mark nodded like he'd expected that answer. Well, I do now. And want to know the funny thing? It doesn't matter. He's still my son in every way that counts. But, or not the mother I thought were. He called for Jamie then, and I watched them leave together. My husband and my son who wasn't my husband and might not be my son. Walking out of my for what felt like the final time. That night I called Ryan for the first time since my marriage exploded. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't a monster. That mistakes happen. That I deserved forgiveness. He didn't answer. When I tried again the next day, his number was disconnected. I was alone with the truth, and the truth was uglier than anything I could have imagined. But the worst was yet to come. Because Mark wasn't done with revelations, and the final truth about my family was going to destroy what little was left of my heart. The call came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after my world had started falling apart. I was sitting in my studio apartment, staring at a bowl of cereal that had gone soggy while I scrolled through social media photos of that I used to have. Mark's name on my phone screen made my heart race. He never called anymore unless it was about Jamie's schedule. Sarah, we need to talk. Can come over. Is Jamie okay? Jess can come over? Please. His house, our house, looked different when I pulled into the driveway. There was a minivan next to Mark's car. Jennifer's van probably. New curtains in the windows. A small pink bicycle on the porch next to Jamie's blue one. They'd made it without me. Mark met me at the door and I was shocked by how tired he looked. Older somehow, like the past year had aged him a decade. Thanks for coming, he said, not meeting my eyes. Jamie's at school. Jennifer took Emma to her playdate. Emma, Jennifer's daughter from her first marriage. The little girl who was probably calling my son her brother now. What's this about, Mark? He led me to the living room, the same couch where we used to watch movies together, where I used to read bedtime stories to Jamie. Now it had different throw pillows, different pictures on the walls. I got another DNA test done, he said without preamble. My stomach dropped. Mark, we already know. Not for me, for Jamie's biological father. The room went silent except for the tick of the grandfather clock Mark's father had given us for our wedding. A clock that was probably gonna Jennifer now. I don't understand. Mark pulled out a manila folder. I hired a private investigator, found David Morrison, the guy from Chicago, David Morrison. I hadn't heard that name in 5 years, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. Dark hair, easy smile, smooth talker who'd bought me drinks and told me I was beautiful and made me feel special for one night. One night that created Jamie. Mark, why would? Because I needed to know. For Jamie's sake. He deserves to know where he comes from. Said it didn't matter. Said he was son regardless. And he is, he always will be. But he's also David Morrison's son, and David Morrison has rights. The folder hit my hands like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Inside were legal documents, DNA results, and a letter that made my vision blur. David Morrison was petitioning for custody of Jamie. Can't do this, I whispered. He can, and he's married now, has 2 other kids, says he wants Jamie to know his real family, or his real family. Tell that to the court. Mark's voice was bitter. Because according to them, I'm just the guy who was tricked into raising another man's child. I felt like I was drowning. What does this mean? It means Jamie's entire is about to be turned upside down, again. Because of choices made. The next few months were a nightmare of court dates, lawyers, and social workers interviewing Jamie about what he wanted. A 5-year-old shouldn't have to choose between families, but that's what my lies had created. David Morrison was everything I wasn't: stable, wealthy, married to his college sweetheart with 2 well-behaved children and a house in the suburbs. He hired the best family lawyer money could buy and painted me as an unfit mother who'd lied about paternity. He wasn't wrong. The worst part was watching Jamie during the supervised visits with his biological father. My sweet boy confused and scared, trying to understand why this stranger wanted him to call him Daddy, when he already had a daddy at home. I don't like him, Jamie whispered to me during one of our visits. He's not my real dad. But the court disagreed. The judge was kind but firm. Custody between David Morrison and me. Mark would have visitation rights as the psychological father, but no legal standing. I watched Mark's face crumble when the verdict was read. The man who'd raised Jamie from birth, who'd been all night with fevers and scraped knees, who'd taught him to ride a bike and tie his shoes, reduced to weekend visits like a divorced uncle. This is what wanted, isn't it? He said to me outside the courtroom. Always said I worked too much. Now I get to see him even less. Mark, I never wanted this. Then should have thought about consequences before decided to our lives. Jennifer was waiting by their car, holding hands with a little girl who looked nothing like Jamie, but who would now be his sister every other week. The new family that was supposed to replace me. But I wasn't being replaced. I was being shared, divided, into pieces that would never fit back together. David Morrison's house was pristine. Perfect lawn, perfect wife, perfect children who sat quietly at dinner and did their homework without being asked. Jamie looked so small and lost in their formal dining room, picking at his food while his half-siblings chattered about school. How's he adjusting? David's wife, Christine, asked me during pickup one day. She was trying to be kind, I could tell, but there was steel underneath. It's hard for him, I said. Al, these changes. Children are resilient, he'll adapt. That word again. Resilient, like it was a good thing that my son was learning not to depend on anyone too much because the adults in his kept letting him down. The first time Jamie called David Dad, I cried for 3 hours. The first time he called Christine Mom, but the worst was yet to come. 6 months into the new custody arrangement, Mark called with news that finished breaking what was left of my heart. Jennifer and I are moving, he said. Her ex-husband got a job transfer to Seattle. She needs to move with Emma and I'm going with them. What about Jamie? He'll visit during school breaks. Summers maybe. Mark, can't leave him. I'm not leaving him, Sarah. Already did that when decided our family wasn't worth staying faithful to. The phone went dead and I realized I was truly alone. Within a month Mark was gone. Jennifer was gone. Even Emma, who Jamie had started to love like a sister, was gone. My son's 3rd family in 2 years dissolved like sugar in water. Jamie took it hard, started wetting the bed again, stopped talking for a week. The school counselor said he was showing signs of attachment disorder. He's afraid to love people. She explained during a meeting that included me, David, and Christine. Because everyone he loves leaves. David and Christine exchanged looks. They were thinking the same thing I was. I was the common denominator in Jamie's abandonment issues. Maybe it would be better if Sarah stepped back for a while. Christine suggested gently. Give Jamie some stability. Needs consistency, David agreed. All these transitions are confusing him. They weren't wrong. But they were asking me to voluntarily give my son to save him from the chaos I'd created. I fought it at first. Demanded my court-ordered time. But Jamie would come back from their house talking about his real family, his plans for when he grew that didn't include me at all. Slowly, I started giving days, missing visits when I was sick, canceling weekend plans when Jamie seemed happier staying with David and Christine. It felt like mercy, but it was really cowardice. I was abandoning him the same way I'd abandoned Mark, because facing the consequences of my choices was too painful. The final came on Jamie's 6th birthday. I'd planned something special. Chuck E. Cheese, his favorite pizza, a new bike I couldn't afford but bought anyway. But when I went to pick him from David's house, Jamie met me at the door with tears in his eyes. I don't want to come with today, he said in a small voice. But it's birthday, sweetie. We want to stay here. Christine made a cake, and my friends are coming over. His friends, at David's house, hurt that he'd built without me. Okay, I whispered. Maybe we can celebrate tomorrow. Maybe, he said, but we both knew we wouldn't. I drove home and called in sick to work. Spent his 6th birthday alone in my apartment, staring at a wrapped bicycle that would never be opened. That night David called. Sarah, we need to talk about what's best for Jamie. He's my son. Because honestly more like a distant relative he visits out of obligation. The words hit me like bullets. But they were true. I'd become a stranger to my own child, a woman who shared DNA with him but nothing else. What are asking? I'm asking to let him go. Sign over parental rights. Let us adopt him legally. Give him the stable family he deserves. I love him. I know do. But sometimes love means stepping aside. I hung but the seed was planted. 3 months later I signed the papers, gave my legal right to the child I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through sleepless nights, and loved with every broken piece of my heart. The last time I saw Jamie, he was 7. We met at a McDonald's playground because neutral territory felt safer for everyone. He was taller, missing 2 front teeth, wearing a soccer uniform from a team I'd never heard of. "Are my birth mom now?" he asked, picking at his chicken nuggets. "I'm always going to be mom," I said, but the words felt hollow. "Christine says birth moms are special because they give children. Real moms are the ones who take care of them every day." I nodded because what else could I do? Christine was right. "Will I see again?" he asked. "I want to. When are older. When are ready." He hugged me goodbye. And I memorized the weight of his small body against mine because I knew it was the last time. That was 3 years ago. Jamie is 10 now. David sends pictures sometimes, Christmas mornings, soccer games, family vacations I'm not part of. He looks happy. Settled, loved. He looks like he belongs exactly where he is, and I'm grateful for that even as it destroys me. I never remarried, never had another child. Some mistakes are too big to move past, too destructive to overcome. I work at a job I don't care about, live in an apartment that still smells like cheap air freshener, and try not to think about that away. People ask me sometimes if I regret it. The affair, the lies, the choices that cost me everything. Of course I do. But regret doesn't bring back the dead, and my family is as dead as if I'd killed them with my own hands. I see Mark on social media occasionally. He and Jennifer got married last year. Emma calls him dad now, and he looks genuinely happy in ways I never saw during our marriage. They have a baby on the way. He blocked me after I liked one too many of his photos, and I don't blame him. Ryan, the man who started this whole nightmare. I looked him once. He's married now too, to someone young and pretty who probably has no idea what kind of man she's tied herself to. I hope she's smarter than I was. But I doubt it, women like us never are. So here I am, writing this at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday, hoping someone out there will read it and make better choices than I did. Hoping some wife who's feeling neglected will remember that the grass isn't greener on the other side, it's dead and rotting underneath. I had everything. A husband who loved me, a child who adored me, a future full of possibilities. And I traded it all for a few months of feeling desired by a man who didn't even remember my last name. The worst part isn't the loneliness, though that's crushing. It isn't the guilt, though that never goes away. It's knowing that somewhere out there, my son is living his best without me in it, and that's exactly as it should be. Because some people don't deserve second chances. Some mistakes can't be forgiven. And sometimes the only way to love someone is to let them go completely. If we're thinking about stepping outside marriage, about that harmless flirtation that's making heart race, about how deserve better than what have, remember this might get exactly what deserve, and it might be nothing at all.